Welcome to the Final Frontiers radio show, where we spotlight inspiring missionary endeavors around the globe. Stay tuned to hear how you can personally get involved, helping the Lord's frontline soldiers effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. In this episode, we'll have an interview highlighting the ministry of veteran missionary Randy Stirewalt in Kenya and Uganda, Africa. We'll also have part 2 of the story of jungle survival that inspired first contact with an unreached tribe in South America. And we'll have a special preview interview with missionary wife Katya Ellis, who was born in Russia.
I'm John Nelms, and I'm here today with Randy Stirewalt, a missionary in Kenya and Uganda. I remember it was, I think, around, Randy, 1992, 94, somewhere in there that you and I first made contact. But really, we've only seen each other a couple of times since then. If I recall correctly, our ministry had been located primarily in Southeast Asia at that time, and I was looking to get into Africa and see what we could do there, and somebody gave me your name. I don't remember who it was, but I sure am glad they did it. And I remember we talked on the phone, and you were home on furlough at that time, and it told me that you were a little bit discouraged. And I asked you why, and you said, well, I've been in Africa X number of years, and you said, I've only started 12 churches. And that just about knocked me off my chair when I heard you say that, because I already knew that most missionaries will never start one church in their life, and here you'd already started 12, and you were discouraged by that. Do you remember that time?
I do, yes.
I just couldn't believe you were discouraged.
Well, I remember, when I'd go out to a church, anytime that you go out, because our work is out in the country, and most of our work is not in the city at all. But even on this past Monday, I was out, and you just drive by road after road after road, and every road, there are thousands of people up that road. Most of them, again, they've never heard a clear presentation of the gospel. And so there's just a lot to do.
Well, I remember after we started working with you that you told me that it had been a tremendous help because previous to our giving support, you were having to take care of these men and their families from your own personal missionary support. And I think a lot of families and churches don't realize the strain that can put on a missionary. How did that affect you personally when you were able to have your money freed up for your use?
Well, we believe very strongly in the local New Testament church. So it is the local church's responsibility to take care of their pastors. But the funds that Final Frontiers was able to start sending to the pastors at that time, we talked to the pastors about this is money that's to be used for evangelism. It's money that's going to be able to take you to the next village and the next village and the next village. It's money that's going to help plant churches. And then that was our basis when we first started working with Final Frontiers, and that's what we've continued now for over 25 years working together.
Yeah, you're one of the oldest lasting groups that we've had, and it's been tremendous to see that you just keep going beyond and accomplishing more and more. For example, I remember once when you let us know that you had crossed over from Kenya into Uganda and were starting to plant churches there. What was the impetus that caused you to do that?
Well, we had 2 young men that had crossed over Mount Elgon into Kenya during the days of Idi Amin. And in their particular area at that time, just thousands had been massacred in the late 1970s. And so they had crossed the mountain. They had become Kenyan citizens, but their desire always was looking back on the other side of the mountain again, where they grew up, where they were born. And so that brought a lot of attention to me because I prayed about the mountain. When I lived in Kitale, I could walk out my door every day when I would walk in the yard and pray. I could see the mountain. And we tried and tried and tried to get contacts, good contacts, where we could start in the mountain on the Kenya side. And God continued to close the door. And then we began to pray about these 2 men about going back. And so that became the emphasis. And it took us about 5 years of planning and buying some property there. And it was a big thing for them now to uproot everything and to move back to Uganda. When David Gagula, the first to move back, his wife, who was Ugandan, but she was born in Kenya, she didn't even know the local dialect. And so took his wife, his family to an area where the language was completely different. Even though they were of that tribe, she had never lived among the tribe. The children didn't know the language. And yet moving back to that area at the foot of Mount Elgon to start churches. So that really began the emphasis then of, let's take the mountain. And today we have churches on the Kenyan side now starting to move up the mountain. So we're hoping that we're going to be on both sides of the mountain one day.
Well, you know, when Joshua Martin, our producer, went out there to Kenya to visit you and your ministries and came back, he put together a video about that Mount Elgon area. And I tell you, Randy, every time I look at it, I had to fight back the tears. And it always makes me want to just get up and fly to Uganda and just live there and serve the Lord there. It's incredible, the ministry that you've had. And I believe Brother David died recently, didn't he?
Yes, he did. I've worked with David for right at 40 years. So it was very sudden for us. I knew that he battled a problem with diabetes, but it just came on very quickly. And it was a very sudden thing for us, but you know, God was glorified. We went in to Uganda for the funeral, and somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people came. And so we're able to preach the gospel to a whole village, a number of villages, because David had quite a great testimony. But the work continues on. We had a really good young assistant pastor that was in the church, and he continues on with that church. And the Bible Institute continues on. It's got more than 40 students in it. So everything will continue on.
That is tremendous. You know, one of the most common questions I've been asked over the years is, how do we find the preachers that we ask folks to support? And for those listening, this is how. We work with men like Randy Stirewalt, missionaries, and not just the missionaries, but also the nationals that they've trained 30, 40 years ago who've developed their own strong ministries. And we go to them and ask referrals from them. Every preacher we support through Brother Randy's ministry, and I don't even know how many that is, but every one of them were referred to us by you. They were led to Christ by you or one of your Timothys, trained in one of your Bible schools, and have gone out and proven themselves. By the way, how many Bible schools do you have now?
Oh, we're 6, and we'll open a 7th one. Well, we'll do a discipleship program in a 7th area, and next year we'll open a 7th Bible Institute.
And where do you get your curriculum?
Well, we developed the curriculums. It's kind of been an evolving thing. You know, we started many years ago, and we needed to write most of our own material. It has to be translated. There's very limited things that you can find in Kiswahili, the language we use in Kenya. So we put together a program. In the early days, I would say that most of the men that we were coming in contact with that were being saved and baptized and discipled had around a 4th and 5th grade education. So we had to develop a curriculum that we could grow from there. Today, most of our students are high school graduates. And so through the years, we've been able to upgrade our teaching material and get the material together. And then 5 years ago, we printed enough books for all of the institutes to last us for about 5 years, and that cost us $8,000 to do all of the printing. And Final Frontiers then last year committed to help us, and so they sent us $2,000 last year, which printed the first year set of books, and then now Final Frontiers has sent us $2,000 again this year, which we're printing right now, doing the printing for the second year of books, and then the next 2 years they'll help us again, and we'll print the third year and the fourth year then for all of the lessons.
We're always happy to do that for you and expect to keep doing it from now till the Lord comes back. When we ask them to support a preacher, $50 a month, a fraction of that goes into a fund that gives us that money to help pay for their curriculum because they need that. These preachers need it. And I know in a lot of countries, many pastors don't even have a Bible. They certainly don't have a Bible college curriculum. So it's our joy to be able to help you. And we've noticed over the years that your men now collectively have started around 600 churches. That is an incredible feat. What would you say would be the average attendance in these churches?
They certainly will vary. The Eldoret Valley Baptist Church here in the city of Eldoret, When I moved to Eldoret in 1978, it was 40,000 people. We're over 400,000 people today. That church averages almost 2,000 every Sunday. And then you can go out into the country and you'll find, the church I was last Sunday was a little over a year old, and we had about 55 to 60. But I would say on average about 150. And we've got a lot of churches that go over the 500 mark, even though they're out in just small village areas.
Well, Randy, if the devil ever starts gnawing away at you again and makes you feel like you haven't done anything, I want you to stop and think. 600 churches running an average of 150 is right at 1 million people in church on any given Sunday. That's what your ministry has produced, and that doesn't count those who've gone on to be with the Lord and those who've moved to other areas of Kenya where you didn't even know you were working in, or Uganda or Burundi or any other place. God has really used you and Phyllis. I wish more missionaries and more Christians in general were just like you and Phyllis are, just giving everything you've got for serving the Lord. And I want to thank you for giving me time to talk to you. It's been a real blessing, and we'll have more episodes in the weeks to come. Thank you, Brother Randy. God bless.
Thank you.
In protected jungles around the world, there are still over 140 isolated tribes that have remained completely uncontacted. Who will reach them first? Loggers and oilmen with their guns, or peaceful ambassadors of Jesus Christ bearing the good news of salvation? These last remaining dark territories on Earth are extremely difficult to penetrate. If you are interested in partnering with us to help fund these expeditions, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
Hello, this is Joshua Martin, and I'm back to continue our jungle story that I was telling you about last week. And you got to understand, this is a story that once when we tried to tell it, it took us about 3 hours. But I am trying to describe somewhat what it's like in the jungles. And I left it where we finally found that river after 4 weeks of hardly eating and being exhausted at the end of our strength. We started building a raft, and we made 7 logs. And we started down the headwaters of this opposite river. There was one time when God did provide a crocodile that was up on a beach, and down on the other side, we started to stalk it into the swamp, and I climbed up through the jungle trees there and speared it. I had a piece of wood that I had gotten earlier, and when we were crossing the cliffs, we really had to have walking sticks. So I had turned that into a spear. He helped me drag that out of there, and then I proceeded to kill it and slaughter it there so that we could have some food, and we took that meat with us. I had the head of that crocodile literally right there in front of me on the back of the raft. Jason was doing the siding of the logs ahead and the power pushing from front, and I was doing the power pushing and steering from the back. I had that crocodile head there to remind me that God was protecting me. We were living on Scripture. Man shall not live by bread alone, and we lived by every word of God. I mean, that was our food at night when you can't sleep and you're itching and you're in pain. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That was something that was constantly in me, and we're hoping in the Lord, because even most of that meat was lost in a raft accident that happened later on. You would hit snags in the river that you could not avoid, and I mean, sometimes I was thrown from the raft and almost drug under. We would lose bags and have to try to capture them back. The river's dangerous, and you're floating there. You're in and out of the water constantly. Proverbs 23:17 and 18, be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. We lived like that, constantly looking to Him, because God, if you do not help us, we do not live, we do not survive. You're depending on Him like a child to a father. He says, for surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. We were constantly hoping, trusting God that He would give us the desire of our hearts as we sought Him. So this period was several weeks. We were at the end of our strength. Our rice ran out on a particular beach that flooded. We never heard the rainstorm way upriver, and it flooded us out, and we were there for 3 days. And we were stuck in the middle of that creek. I would go out hunting crocodile in the night. I'd wake up and go out and shine the flashlight looking for eyes, almost catch them, almost spear them. We would try hunting birds during the day, crawling on our bellies with a slingshot that we had, and steel pellets would bounce off the birds. I mean, we begged God for food, and I would fish every day until my emaciated shoulders and back would just hurt so much just from the fishing line I had in my hand tied to my other hand. I would throw it out there. I'd have little bitty fish nibbling on my legs, and your ears would play tricks on you. You would hear waterfalls in the river, and you would think there's a boat coming. You would think there's people, and nothing would ever come around the bend. And so for 3 days we hunted, and we couldn't catch anything. And we had just that little bit of rice. It was like just a quarter a cup each night. When that was gone, we were done. And I can remember camping on the other side. We built another raft because the waters had stolen our raft completely. You know, we had it staked down many times, but the waters were still high enough that it took them away. And I can remember we felt like we were to arise and build, kind of like Nehemiah. Like God told us, just don't be afraid, just get up and do it. And we spent all day with the strength we had just cutting down for that raft. There had been another day where we fell trees in the jungle, and it took pretty much the whole day after stomach sicknesses and things. I can remember laying on the beach looking at the stars and hearing the owls sing to me, and it's terrible stomach pains, and God got us through that. So we had built this raft, this last raft. And when we did that, we put our tents up because there was no way we had the strength to paddle anywhere that day. We could barely paddle when we did have daylight. You'd look at your paddle and try to make your mind make it move because you'd be sitting on that raft and you could barely do that at all. And sometimes you'd hit low spots in the river and you'd get stuck there and you'd get out and you'd think, how in the world can I push these logs and find, we're in the shallows. How can we get to the deep again? And it was exhausting, terribly exhausting. But I can remember I was looking through the scriptures of God taking care of me and feeding me, and that he shall not suffer the righteous to famish was the scripture that burdened me so much. And I got up out of my tent and I told Jason, I said, I'm going to go down and fish one more time. In faith, I said, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and lay down. But I said, he will provide for us. And I went down there, and as I was walking to the water, I saw a fish jump. I literally saw it. Within just 2 times of throwing out that line, God gave me a fish. And I laughed and I cried and I praised the Lord, and we cooked that thing. And so God fed us that day. Every day after that, he gave us something. Now, our stomachs were so shrunk. If you could have seen us, you could see our bones. I remember when we did finally catch up with our other raft and we were able to get some of the rope off of it to make our raft stronger. God gave me a piranha that day. Another day, he let Jason find turtle eggs up on the shore. We could barely even walk. We were so tired, and we felt like we owed it to our families to try to make it to the edge of civilization and not stop until our flight that was going out of that country, unless we hit that date. Then we would stop and we would survive, but until that time, we felt that we needed to do our best. So we continued down that river. We did not stop. We just trusted God to keep us alive, and every day he gave us something to eat. We had maps during this whole time, so we knew where we were on the rivers. You simply had to follow the river all the way down to the little villages and eventually the biggest city clear down on the edge. So we knew where we were going. There was no way to get lost on that river, but it was going to take much more time than what we were told. So I can remember getting to the last few days and right before our flight was going to go out, and we still had faith in our heart. It's just a gift of God. I can remember the very last night when we fished and we had this little bitty fish and we cooked that thing. We were hoping for something bigger, and we were so tired that we actually spilled the soup, and we recooked and tried to get as much nutrients as we could. And there was a little crocodile coming up on the edge of the beach, and I was trying to lure him in, and that didn't work. And we put out bait for fish, and the crocodile stole it during the night. We never got any more food that night. We even heard jaguar right across the river, 30 feet away maybe, and the jaguar were really hungry that night. You could hear them, and yet God kept them away from us. The next morning, we were exhausted, and we had really hoped for something to eat. But that was when we heard a plane. We were out there, and we had trusted God. Our last strength in prayer, we had poured out, and we said, we're going to get on that raft, and we're going to keep paddling, looking for people. And there were times when we had sung our way through storms, and we thought, Lord, is there another cold front coming in? Our bodies can't do this. And we would sing until we saw the sun, and he would give us strength to paddle. So we heard that plane, and come to find out, the people back home had been waiting to a certain point, And this was the perfect day. There's many ways I could tell you why that's true, but God had gotten it to that point, and he had told the people back there to look for us. There was a man who was a Marine, and there was another man in that plane, and they were able to find our raft in all of that gigantic jungle and dropped buckets of food that they had prepared. And it was like all that time we had been trusting him for food, and that last day he dropped manna from heaven. And you can't imagine what that does for people that have no more strength left. I mean, you cry for Thanksgiving. We had apples in there, and we had Gatorade packets and mixed nuts and instant oatmeal, and so it was amazing. And we rested that day because there was a radio that they had sent. We managed to get the radio working, and they said, we'll send a float plane the next day. And that had to happen soon because the river was going down. So that next morning, we were taken out of there. And the scriptures, Psalm 18, verse 16, it says, he sent from above, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. Those scriptures had been given to us before that happened. Another one was Psalm 124:7, our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. And that's exactly what it felt like when we were lifted up out of there. Someone else was pushing us. We were not pushing ourselves on that raft anymore. God had sent a servant there that was a Christian, and he came, and he found us, and he brought us up out of there. And I remember looking out of the windows of that small plane and just seeing the mammoth landscape underneath me and knowing I had been in that place there. Like a bird, we flew out of there. And we praised the Lord. He took us back. He had promised me health. What a lot of people don't know is that I had talked to John Nelms on the phone before this trip. I said, I never know what I'm going to be like when I come out of one of these jungle expeditions after a tribe. I don't know. I can't promise you anything, but I'm just going to trust the Lord that I'm going to be coming and I'm going to get to meet you. He had wanted me to come after that to a totally different country, Honduras, and work for him. And I trusted God that I was going to do this, and God had promised me, I will heal you, and he did. I even made the mistake. I was so tired and so out of it that I drank a cup and a half of the water, and you're not supposed to do that in these countries. And yet he immediately stilled my heart and said, don't be afraid. And I was perfectly healthy that night. I was perfectly healthy after that. He started building, giving me strength, and I was able to go to Honduras right after that and begin working for Final Frontiers. So a lot of the video footage and things that I do now, God kept me alive through that whole situation to be able to accomplish that. Now, during this, there were many people that thought we were dead, and the news spread through the country and also through the United States that we were gone, we were dead. And because of that, there were tribal people that we had preached to in the past that were very close to the unreached people we were after. They were like distant cousins. They spoke a similar dialect. These people got up in one of the meetings and said, you know, Josh and Jason are dead. They have given their lives, and they said, we are going to go and do what they did. These guys went in themselves. They fasted and they prayed. They went for a different group of the same people on a more southern river, and these happened to be very friendly. God made it so that they could understand completely their language, which had never happened before, and they made contact. And it was because of what we had suffered that inspired them to reach their own people. And since then, we've been with some of these guys that have made first contact, and we've cried over it, and we've just blessed the Lord that we could be a part of it. And they're going through a lot, so I challenge you to pray for them because they are still there trying to reach those people. They don't have a lot of money, and yet God is doing something. There's a scripture in Colossians 1:24 that says, Paul's talking, he says, who now rejoice in my sufferings for you and fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ in my flesh, for his body's sake, which is the church. And so he talks about actually suffering for the church's sake, filling up that which is behind, because Christ is suffering through you. Christ was suffering through Paul for the sake of churches being birthed in different places. I cannot describe to you everything that happened. There's no way to do that in just two of these little sessions here. But God was good through the midst of it, and I glorify him that he got us out alive. And those scriptures that my sister had given us, I made those into a song. That was Psalm 33:18-22. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy. That was the theme of our trip, and we saw that that was true. And we have seen great blessings because of what we suffered there. So I hope this has been a blessing to you, and it inspires you to keep serving the Lord. We here at Final Frontiers have been through a lot of suffering. We are not just people in an office somewhere. we have done much missions work, and we continue to do so. So our hearts are for missionaries. We love missionaries. We love the national preachers, and we love the American missionaries, all of them, anyone, whoever they are. Missions is what we love. So I hope this has been a blessing to you. Thank you for listening today.
Your inquiries and comments are important to us. If you have any questions or perhaps subject matter you would like to have addressed on this show, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
We often see the Great Commission as our generalized marching orders, telling us to go but not where to go. This is because of our misunderstanding of the word nation. If we accept it to be a synonym of the word country, then the Great Commission has long since been fulfilled. That is, until a new country is born. But when we understand that the word given by Christ was not country but ethos, meaning people, tribal, ethnic groups, or clans, then we realize the task is not finished. We need to find out why. Out of 195 countries, 30% of all independent Baptist missionaries live in just 5. Because so many missionary families are lumped together, it leaves 72 countries that do not have even one missionary family. Mexico has the second largest number of missionaries with 206 families. Most, if not all, were trained to reach only those speaking Spanish. But there are other ethnic groups living there who do not speak Spanish. Scores of them. For example, 22% of the population identifies as being indigenous and not Mexican. That's over 28 million people. Among them are 64 languages recognized as indigenous. This includes 17 tribes that have more than 100,000 people and 47 tribes or clans that have less. Yet, for the most part, if some devoted missionary finds and evangelizes just one of these tribes, it is because he stumbled upon them or heard of them and intentionally sought them out, not because he was taught that they were there in the first place. God told us to go everywhere, so I must wonder why he would seemingly call so many missionaries to one country and none to others. The fact is that though we go as missionaries in name, we actually go as pastors in practice. It's hard for a pastor to continually move from place to place, but Paul taught us that it is imperative for a missionary to do so. How else will the entire world hear the gospel? So one reason we haven't yet finished the commission is because we are most often sending pastors and calling them missionaries. It's a great idea. It's just not God's plan. I'm John Nelms. To learn more about missions, order a copy of my book, The Great Omission, on our website at finalfrontiers.world. With us today is Katya Ellis, the wife of Dennis, who is from Russia, and we'd like to take a few moments to hear what she has to say about their ministry.
We had like 3 services a week in church. Then 4 days of Bible college. So he was teaching classes. No, I was translating only his classes. And then every Tuesday radio program.
So what were the radio programs?
30 minutes of preaching and then call-ins. He was even not stopping for translation. It was just like with 2 voices together, floating. So radio program together live. They asking, I have to translate their question to him. He answers them. I translate the answer to them.
So radio, what else?
4 teenage boys to feed, women's ministry in church, and a full-time interpreter for him.
When you say women's ministry, what was that? Bible study? Or?
Once a month we met with ladies and have food, cookies, and I was teaching them. I usually, because of my gift is translating, interpreting, I cannot just preach. I was translating English books of Billy Graham's daughter for them and just read my translations.
But what were you doing before you got involved in the ministry?
You mean professional?
Yeah.
I'm chemical engineer. I have master's degree in chemical engineering. I was working at Academy of Science.
So you were intelligent.
You doubt that?
No, but you married Dennis.
No. But when I came to church, I was working in a humanitarian organization before I started translating for him. I was distributing humanitarian aid, and we were like Christ for Humanity.
As a volunteer?
No, I was I was warehouse manager.
Oh, okay.
So I was program in our organization was give away help, but before that, every time preach the gospel. So the preacher boys he trained were coming to preach for my distributions, and then I was giving away clothes, medicine, whatever, food to hospitals, schools, everybody in the city. And then sometimes when his preacher boys cannot come, he would come, and I have to translate for him. That's how I start translating for him.
That's how y'all met then?
We met in church, 92.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty neat.
I was translating. I was busy. He had morning devotions in the office for staff members every day. And those I didn't go. I said, I just cannot translate all day long.
What did you think when you first saw him?
I don't know.
Oh, Lord, please
He
don't
just
let him
grows
go.
on me.
He grows on you.
But he knows that I love him more now than when I married him.
We were crossing a bridge over the Neva River, and the marriage palace was at the end there. I knew what it was, and we were stuck in traffic. We couldn't move. And she looked over at me and said, that's where we'll register our marriage. I got out of the car, and I danced all over that bridge. I was so excited. And it's been a journey.
Yep. Like you asking, what is my ministry? And we came here, took that church for interim pastor for a few months. And the ladies wanted me to take over the prayer ministry, women's ministry, whatever. I said, I'm not taking over of anything. I said, what is your ministry? What are you doing? I said, my ministry is him. And I said, he is my mission field. I know how he is important to people and how much he has to give. And I'm just making sure he does that without worrying what to eat, what to wear, where to sleep, and other details. So that's my ministry, to empower him to do his ministry.
Well, she's got it. I'd be dead. I'm not saying that figuratively.
Literally, huh?
She has saved me over and over.
Katya, thank you so much. I know it's going to be a blessing to the ladies who are listening in our audience. God bless you.
You've been listening to the Final Frontiers radio show, funded by sponsors like you. Thank you so much for joining us. Through the funding of national and native preachers, we endeavor to effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. If you want more information, visit www.finalfrontiers.world. That's finalfrontiers.world.